So this will be the last video of this series where we try to just round everything up. In the last video, we were able to display this overlay when the user runs out of questions. So there's still another way that we can end the quiz when the user runs out of time, right? So what I'm going to do now is I am going to kind of like create a function that kind of takes care of whatever happens or all the things that should happen when the quiz ends. So let me just come down. Just see here. It could be anywhere. So let's say const. What do we call it now? Let's say on quiz end. Okay, and this is going to be a function. Oops, let's delete that. So this function, now remember that this isn't the setup, so we actually need to, if we're going to use this, we need to return it. So let me just do that before I start adding anything. On quiz end. Okay, so here they are kind of, we list out all the things we want to happen when the quiz ends. So one of them is that we calculate the percentage score. So just put a comment, percentage. Now, because of the uniqueness of this quiz, you might not need to do like a calculation, because I think the highest you can score is 100. So whatever you score, and it's in increments of 10. So whatever you score actually is the percentage, but we just do that anyways. So the way we're going to do that, it's let's define a value here, and then at the beginning of that, let's say percentage score. At the beginning of the game, the percentage is of course 0, like so. Let's make it a ref so that we can update that. So at the beginning it's 0. Don't forget I need to also return this percentage score. And then for us to calculate the score, let's update it. So percentage the value, because we want to update that, it's going to be equal to score.value divided by 100, and we'll multiply that by 100. So this will still give us whatever the score is, but just in case you set up a kind of like a different scoring system where the score doesn't really equate to like the same percentage, then you have to like do a calculation, which we did just now. I do apologize for this squiggly lines, so I have prettier setup. Okay, that's better. So after calculating the percentage score, another thing we want to do when the game ends is quiz end is stop the timer. So to stop the timer, how do we do that? So let's go and look at the countdown timer function. So basically we can just set the timer to 0, which means that the time is up. So I'll say timer.value is equal to 0. I think that handles that. And then what we want to do is display the end overlay, show overlay, and here we just say end of quiz dot value equal to true. So pretty much these are the things that need to happen when the quiz ends. So all we need to do is, for whatever scenario that triggers the end of the quiz, we just call this function and it does everything it needs to do. Let me just get rid of this squiggly lines. Okay, so what are those scenarios? So one of them is when we're out of time. So when I go to the countdown timer, you can see where we have out of time. I can just hit enter and call the function here. So when time is up, it's going to call this function and then clears the timer. Then another scenario is when we're out of questions. So I'll go to my load questions function. That is where I implemented the out of question. So I just go in here, add this. So I'll put this now because end of quiz already takes care of the overlay, so I just get rid of this one. So when we don't have any questions, we trigger this function, and that should be it. So if we save, let's test. So I'll just let it run out of time and let's see. So you can see we have that right here. So that works. So we can also check for when we run out of questions. So let me just quickly just answer, go through the questions. So you can see that also shows up. So our 2 case scenario have been taken care of. So what we want to do is get this to display the percentage as it's meant to be. So we can pass the value of this percentage using props. So props are just ways that parents can pass down data to their children. So in this case, this component here that we created is a child of this home.view, right? So quiz complete overlay is in here, so it's kind of like a child. So we can pass in that data to it. So I'll just give a space. So you do that like you're writing an attribute. So whatever name you type here acts like the variable name. So let me just call it %. It could be anything, right? So % just stands for the name, and this column, it's like is vbind. So we're binding this to a variable that is in this particular file, which is the percentage score. So we're passing this is a prop. So when this gets into the quiz complete overlay, we need to somehow read the value and update this 100% right here. So we're going to do that by going down here. Let's add the scripts for view files here, and then what I'll do is I'll just go here. It's not in setup, I'll just say props. And there are 2 ways we can actually define props. You can use the object way, where you can define the type, default value, which is kind of the recommended way. But since this is just a very simple app, I can just simply use the array method. So in this method, once you define your props here, the value needs to be the same name. Let's put a comma. The same name with what the prop is here. So %. So that way I can call up this % anywhere in the template, and it will read that value for us. So I need to call it up where this 100 is. So I just highlight this, put in my curly brackets, and just type %. So as easy as that. Okay, so I'll need to, let's save this one. Okay, good. So it's passing the score, which is 30%. So you can see that there. So another thing we need to do is this retry button doesn't work yet. So but what we wanted to do is to kind of like start the quiz again. This done button, let's just work on the retry. So what we are going to do, I'm back on my home.view. Let us kind of create a function that handles everything that needs to be done when the game starts, right? So that anytime we call that function, it can restart the game itself. Yeah. So just like I have on quiz end, let's have another function. So it's on quiz start. So this is going to be just a normal function. So let me make sure I return that, just so I don't forget. Okay, so here we need to list out all the things that we need to do when the quiz starts. So what I will do is let me just copy all of this, Ctrl C, then come to on quiz starts. So the first thing we need to do when the quiz starts is set default values. I'll just paste, but I need to make some changes. Since we're not setting them here, we are updating them, so I need to get rid of all the lets because we're not creating the variables here. And also, okay, get rid of the consts too. Any const, any lets goes. So I need to put the value for all of them because we're updating the values, and get rid of all the refs. So let me remove all the refs. Remove this ones. And then we're going to add the value for all of. Okay, that value. Okay, so can click the value equal to true. So these are like our default settings when the game starts. So can click should be true, timer should be 100, end of quiz should be false. Obviously, the question counter should be 0 because they started from the beginning. The score should be 0. The current question is going to be empty. Percentage score is going to be 0, and the question, which is the current question, should be 0 too. So after setting these default values, what we're going to do is fetch the questions from the server. So I can put, let me just say number 2 here, number 1. So after setting this is when the game starts. So I can as well just call this here. Okay, so what we have here is that when unmounted, obviously when we load this game, it just fetches the question from the server because all of this is obviously set here. But for some reason, if we want to trigger a restart so that we don't have to refresh the page, we can trigger this on quiz start, which will reset the values and fetch the questions again. Okay, let's see if this works. How do we call this? Now this on quiz start, we're not calling it here, right? We are calling it in the quiz complete overlay, even though it was defined here, right? So we need to find a way to get this retry button to somehow call this function. Because there are other ways you can do this. You can kind of like make it a global method by using mixins or Vuex. Then you can always trigger it from anywhere. You just call it up. But since we're using this method, we kind of need to pass, or rather, we kind of need to get this to be able to trigger a method in the parent. And we're going to do that by emitting the function. Okay, so what that simply means is that back in my home.view, we are going to let this component be aware of a particular function that exists in the parent, right? So we're making it aware of what that function is by passing it, kind of like emitting a function. That's basically what it means. So let me call it okay, so I'll say add restart quiz. Let me put it that way. So what I'm trying to do here is telling this component that, hey, I'm giving you a trigger. The name of the trigger is going to be called restart quiz. All right. Now, restart quiz is going to run something. So that's something what I put here. Now, something I wanted to run, it's on quiz start. Okay, so I'll just put on quiz start in here. So I'm telling this component that you can use this name here called restart quiz to trigger a method. And in this case, this method is living in your parent. So this component is going to be aware of this function. But just to explain, it's going to be aware of this function or be able to trigger this function if it calls restart quiz using like emitting the function. So in my component now, let me just get rid of this. I want this retry button to be able to do that. So I'll say, okay, when we click, which is at click, I want you to, run that function. And we'll do that by saying $emit, open a bracket. So in here is where I'm going to put the name of the trigger I told you to use, right? So when I click this retry, it sends this trigger, right? Restart quiz. So this trigger comes here and runs this. So when it triggers this, it checks, oh, what method do I have to run, which is onQuizStart. So it runs the onQuizStart for us. So let's just see if that works. Just wait for the timer to go off. Okay, all done. Let's click on retry. That's not working. So let's see. For some reason, that's not working. Okay, let me just refresh just to make sure. And wait for the time to run down. Okay, let's click on it. Yeah, so now we get an error. See, can't assign this property value untrue, not an object. True. Did I try to change anything? True. Can assign. Can click equal to true. Can assign by value. Value I can assign. Let's see. Okay. So what I think the issue is, this can click did not have a ref. Let's change this. Let's just remove that dot value because we don't need that. Okay, so refresh it. Let's refresh just to make sure. Wait for the timer to run down. Okay, so let's click on retry and then it starts again. So that works flawlessly. For the done button, probably what you could do, because I really don't want to waste so much time anymore. So the done, you can kind of like do the same thing, maybe trigger another overlay or something, but I just feel I can just get rid of this and just comment that out. So we just have the retry button. I can just say play again. Yeah, so I think that's okay. So it starts all over again. So if you have stayed with me till this time, there's one of the issues that happens when the questions are not formatted correctly. So sometimes we have some HTML entities or something like that that comes in with the question. I'm trying to see if I'll see one question like that. Okay, I really can't find any. I don't know. Now I need to see it. I can't find it. Okay, yeah, here is it. So you can see this question. Say what is known as quote the brain quote. So these are like escaped characters. So I need a way to like convert it back so that it can display properly. So for that, I wouldn't waste so much of your time, but I'll explain what I'm going to do. So basically, the issue is coming from the server. That's the response from the server. But where I can fix it without changing much of my code, it's actually where I'm calling in or displaying the current question. So what I want to do is find a way to format this, kind of like replace all those entities or all those escaped characters with the right ones, right? I don't want to touch much of what I've done already. Okay, so I'm looking for the smallest possible way. Okay, so the way I'm going to do that is I would have a computed property, right? So with the computed property, I can perform some operations and then return a value. So just before where I have my components, or it could be after, I just add the computed property. So in here, let me create some, let's just say formatted question. So usually computed properties must return a value. So I just return this for now, just in case I have problems with this, referring to the question. So here, what I'm going to do is I'm going to format the question. So there's a list of all the, just a short list of all the things that we might encounter. Let me just paste it here. Okay. Now what this does is it gets the current question, and then it replaces, like I create a replacement for anywhere I see any of these values, right? And I return it. Okay, let's just format this. But this doesn't do anything yet until we actually use it. So since it's a computed property, I'll just use that in my template directly. So where do we have? Good. So I'll just replace this with formatted questions, or question rather. So I'll save, and that should still work. So one of the things I can notice is that I can see this is already solved. And if you want to confirm, then just open up the console and let's have a look at the first question. In fact, the first question here has that quote here, but you can see in the display it displayed correctly. So one of the things I'm going to add is let's just get this online. So just a simple way to host this. So in this example, I'm just going to use Netlify. So let's just quickly do that. So it's Netlify. So when you're Netlify, you just make sure that if you don't have an account, just go ahead and create that. I already have an account. So I'll just say new site from the Git. I'll connect my GitHub. And I'll make a selection of my Git repository. So once you select that, it's quite easy. You just click on, I think I want to deploy the master. So just click on deploy site. So it's going to run that for you. And when it's done running that for the first time, it's going to give you a URL that you can use. And just like that, your website is online. So our build is done. We can just click on preview. It's going to open up the URL for you. We can make changes to this URL. Let me just go back. Let's click on some domain settings, I guess. I think it should be inside settings. Yeah. So site settings, or just go to general, then go to change site name. I'll just change the name to something easier. So say quiz app. So Tailwind. I'll save. Hopefully. Okay, so that's available. So our URL has changed from that to this. Now I intentionally did not commit my last change. So you can see it says quotes and all that. I intentionally didn't do that so that I'll show you that once you commit to your GitHub that you connected this to, it's automatically updates. So let's do that. So let's just say git add all. So let's say git commit say update end of quiz. So now we have committed that we need to push it. So click push. Now I already connected this to a remote repository. So that has pushed. So if we go back to Netlify, so let's go back, you can see it's building that with the updates. So that brings us to the end of the video. We've gone from scratch to deployment. If you found the video helpful in any way, or you just like the video and want to support me, give it a thumbs up, hit that subscribe button, and let me know what kind of videos you'd like to see in the comment section.